Here's the Canon 70-200 f4 IS version 2 lens that was recently released by Canon. In this video, I'm going to talk about my initial experience with using this lens and compare it to the previous generation, the Mark I of the lens. Now, I made an earlier video on this channel where I said the first version, 70-200 f4 IS, was a great lens. I have a Canon 5D Mark IV and I have a Canon 80D, and this lens is fantastic on both of those cameras for photography and for video. But the major drawback that I discovered with this lens was the noise that it made in the image stabilization. So what's different between the version 2 and the version 1? As far as size goes, the length appears to be the same. To me, it weighs the same, although the new version is supposed to be 40 grams heavier, but when I'm holding it, I cannot tell. It is a little wider on the barrel end than the first version, and the lens ring itself is wider. So here is a 72mm lens thread, and this is a 67mm lens thread. The new generation has another mode of stabilization. The first gen has only 1 and 2. Second has 1, 2, 3. This is supposed to improve when you have this lens on for video. Next on the lens is the minimum focus distance. On the first version, you have 1.2 meters to 3 meters. And on this new version, you have full to 3 meters. Now, what does full mean? Full on this version 2 is 1 meter. So you have a 1 meter minimum focus distance, where the first version has 1.2 meters. When it translates to feet, that's 3.3 feet versus 3.9 feet. The improvement with the stabilization is supposed to give the new version 5 stops of stabilization, where the previous version had only 3 stops. One of the most significant differences to me in the old version versus the new version is the noise of the stabilization motor. Here's a Canon 80D. Here's the first version. I turned it on to video mode, and I'm going to be quiet for a while so you can hear the stabilization noise coming from the camera in video mode. You hear the noise of the stabilizer working the minute you put this lens on as you have the stabilizer. And when I turn the stabilizer off, you're going to hear this noise disappear. Now here's version 2. I could barely hear that motor. I'm going to try the different stabilization modes. Going to go into mode 2. I hear nothing. And now I'm going to go into mode 3, which is the mode that's supposedly meant for video. I hear absolutely nothing with that stabilization. And I also hear less noise coming from the autofocus. When I was using this in video mode for some of my tests, I noticed that the autofocus was faster and quieter than the first version in video and in stills. And just for comparison, because I had it, here's the Canon 55-250 Stm lens, which in the Stm series of lenses are supposed to be designed for video and ultra quiet. The Stm lens is silent. It's silent in its stabilization, and it's also silent in its autofocus. This is one of the benefits of the Stm series. I really like using the Stm lenses when I'm shooting video on my Canon C100s because there's no noise, there's no autofocus rotating like you do on the L lenses. It's absolutely silent. You do get the drawback of a lower quality glass, plastic mounts, and on this lens anyways, it's not a consistent f-stop all the way through the lens. But I really like the 55 to 250, especially when I was using it on the C100s when I need telephoto shots. It's very sharp for the price, and I, in a lot of situations, can't tell the difference in quality between this one and the version 1 of the Canon f4 lens. I took these 3 lenses with me to do some test footage and do some test stills. I wasn't shooting anything glamorous or spectacular, just to test it for myself. I started with the Canon 70-200 f4 IS version 2, shooting different zoom ranges, different motions. I was shooting 60p 1080 on my 80D. No color correction, nothing. I checked the exposure for the most part, but it was a little overexposed. Then I shot with in the same location. I shot with the Canon 70-200 f4 IS. Similar shots as the second version. And then I busted out the Canon 55 to 250 just to have something to compare to that's a lower price range on the 80D. And I was shooting some stills and video. Now if you're looking for a telephoto lens for your Canon crop sensor camera and you have no budget, I would definitely purchase the 55 to 250 versus these 2 lenses. The 55 to 200 is a pretty good deal. I have really liked this lens. I'm constantly surprised by what this lens can do. Now if you have a full frame camera, the 55 to 250 is not going to work. And in that case, you're looking between these 2 lenses when it comes to budget. Now if you're trying to decide between the first version and the second version of the 70-200 f4 and you shoot a lot of video, you have a full frame camera and you have maybe a C100, C200, but you primarily shoot a lot of video, I would get the version 2 simply because the lens stabilization is silent and it's a lot better in video. If you have the version 1 and you're debating whether or not to upgrade to the version 2, if you have the money, I would get it. Upgrading to the version 2 lens could be a really good deal for you if you use it a lot for video, if you use it a lot for stills on full frame cameras. I really like the version 2 lens and I probably will upgrade from my version 1.